technical session, which is on climate change. Well, it is a very complex subject, and my understanding about climate change and how it is affecting economy, environment, sustainability is very, very limited, related only to agriculture. So I will reserve my comments after listening to the paper from the experts who are well respected and well known in their area. So I also propose that to complete the session on time, if each speaker try to complete the presentation in say 15 minutes or so, then we can have good time for question answer also. Thank you. You want 20 minutes for each session? Okay.
I would request Mr. R. Rashmi to share your valuable insights on the first theme of the conference.
Thank you very much. And now we can say good afternoon. Professor Ramesh, Professor Kundu, Professor Dua, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen who are present here. It's an honor for me to be the first speaker after the inaugural session, and I thank Professor Ramesh Chand for giving me this opportunity. You have heard in the previous session and Dr. Chand's outstanding presentation on the issues in agriculture. That is from the impacts point of view. Climate change is causing huge impacts on us. So what I will do is, since my association with climate change has been from a negotiating perspective, as a problem that needs to be addressed within a framework of mitigation and adaptation at the global level. And then I'll address some of the issues in the global crisis. I'll try to make a presentation on some of the issues which are agitating the global dynamics, and then also point out what are the reasons why we have failed in addressing it so far. And after that, I'll come to India. Try to explain what is our response, what is the challenge, what are we doing enough, and what is it that we can do in future. So first about the crisis. Now, some of you who have been associated with this field, you are all economists and scientists. So there are 9 planetary boundaries that are being talked about today, and climate change is one of them. And unfortunately, amongst these 9 planetary boundaries, which we are not supposed to cross in the interest of planetary stability, we have already crossed 6 of them. And of course, climate change happens to be at the top. So the most pressing problem amongst the planetary environmental problems today is the climate change. There are many others, and each of them have their own dynamics. They have their own reasons, they have their own dimensions, and all of them are not equal. But the method of addressing them also is different. So climate change is one of them, is the most pressing problem. And the temperature rise, of course, is the most important manifestation of this. Again, there are many other dimensions, but I'm mentioning temperature rise because this is the global goal that we have adopted now. And you can see the graph here The graph is actually, you see the upturn of the graph has started taking place in the last 150 years. Something which has been remained unchanged for millions of years. It has now started changing. So this is a matter of concern. And the concern is that by the end of this century, this will reach somewhere around 3.5 degree. In fact, I was told by some of my colleagues who work on this area that for some brief period, last year we had already crossed 1.5 degree. And 1.5 degree is the global goal. You know, we are expected to stabilize climate at that level with our efforts. So we are certainly not there. In fact, we have already exceeded briefly. So that is a statistical incidence, but generally the trend is that by within next 10 to 15 years, we will cross it and we will reach somewhere around 3.5 if we don't do enough. And then just to clarify, these are scenarios prepared by the IPCC. You know, these are 5. In fact, there are almost hundreds of scenarios, and this key socio-economic, the progressive scenarios, which they call SSPs, you need to look at only the middle one, SSP 4.5, which is the moderate scenario. So the moderate scenario tells you 3.5 degree. If you take the extreme scenario, which is 8.5, it takes you to 5.7. This is unbearable. And so what is the problem now? Given this trend in the temperature, the problem is that there is a global agreement called Paris Agreement on this. There is a global goal under that agreement, which we are all supposed to make efforts to reach that level of stability. But the total impact of all our efforts being made, including that being made by India, is about 5.3%. We are expected to bring it down. If you look at the trend here, the IPCC projection is that we are supposed to bring the emissions down by 43% compared with 2019 levels by 2030. So in next 5 years, within the next 5 years, our total reduction from 2019 levels is expected to be 43%, but the total impact estimated by the IPCC and by the UNFCCC is that the total impact is not going to exceed 5.3%. So this is a extremely dismal scenario, and we are certainly going to overshoot the limit which we have set for ourselves. And this is mainly a result of the gap in efforts, which is quantified in terms of emissions. So what is the emissions gap? Emissions gap is today it's around 20 between the NDCs and the pathway. The NDCs are the national ambitions, national targets which countries have undertaken. So the difference between the global pathway, which is expected to be followed, and the actual impact, this is expressed in terms of emissions gap, and you can see the current global emissions are around 52. They should have been brought down to 20 by 2030. Currently, from 52 to 20 within next 5 years, this is an impossible thing to happen. So the conclusion is that this problem is not going to go away. This problem is in fact going to stay, and this is going to exacerbate. What is the reason? Why are we failing in this? So I have given you a table on the share in the current emissions. Of course, this doesn't tell you the total picture, because the efforts are currently, the targets are based on current emissions, but the climate change historically is a result of historical cumulative emissions. So even if, you can see now China is leading the herd, 26% share in contributions. But China's contribution is not 26% if you take the cumulative. Cumulative tells you a completely different story. So in fact, rather than spending time on this, I'll take you to the cumulative slide. Why should we talk about cumulative slide? Is because we have a level to reach. And that level is a result of cumulative emissions, which results in total concentration. Now, total concentration, the scientists tell us, should not exceed 550 parts per million. We have already reached 419 parts per million as of 2 years ago. 2022, the figure was 419. And we are not expected to cross the level of 550 at the best, at the most. We are almost within next, the 100 parts per million, this gap, the scientists again tell us that in the next 15 years this will be filled. So this is again basically a reiteration of the earlier emissions gap. So this is more in terms of a graph, and that was in terms of a table. Cumulative emission has another dimension. It's called carbon budget. So we are expected to live within a carbon budget. Now that carbon budget is almost 3,200 gigatons, if you take the last 200 years from industrial revolution. But out of 3,200 of total carbon space in the atmosphere, 2,400 has already been used up by everyone, including the largest contributors in the history, which is the OECD countries. They have occupied almost 55% of the space. So almost 75% of the global carbon space is already occupied. Dr. Chaturvedi was talking about colonization. I don't know whether we can call it a colonial occupation of the carbon space, but this is the real fact of life. And now today we are also contributing. We are contributing in very large measure because China is contributing, India is contributing. We are still 7% of the total emissions at this moment, but our cumulative share is not more than 6% even now. So this is the real problem. What is the allocation of the additional balance carbon space? How is it going to be used by countries which are both developed and developing? We are a developing country. Our emissions are going to grow in future. How much of this carbon space will really be available to us? If we have to maintain the stability, atmospheric temperature stability at 1.5 degree, then very little of this carbon space is going to be allotted to us, because India is a large emitter. We are the third largest emitter today in the world. So all the fingers get pointed at us. We cannot get more than what is due to us if we need to grow, and that is the real challenge. Moreover, in addition to this problem of historical occupation of carbon space, which limits our developmental potential, we are also expected to reach net zero by 2050. Not 1.5 degree stabilization, but net zero in terms of emissions by 2050. And it's only 20 more years. And this casts another additional burden in terms of developmental strategy that we need to follow. I'll come to that. We have a goal of being developed by 2047, which means a rise in energy consumption, a rise in emissions, but we have also a goal of reducing the emissions by 2070. We, all of us know these figures. I'll not spend time on this. I'll rather spend time on this current composition of the India's emissions. Since we have talked about agriculture in the first inaugural session, let's see agriculture. Where is it? It's about 16% of total emissions today. It's almost the same as in the case of, not exactly the same, but somewhere there where its share in the GDP lies. So it's more or less the same. The largest share in terms of emissions, India's emissions, obviously comes from energy. Energy is consumed across economic sectors, not in one sector. It's electricity, it's transport, it is industries, even agriculture, where fertilizers are so intense. It's an energy intensive input. So all the energy is used across economic sectors, and that gives you about 75%, out of which 40% is electricity. Then we have IPPU, is basically industrial processes, which is steel, cement. They don't use energy just for the sake of input, but also heat. They are heat intensive industries, so they give us additional dose of emissions into the atmosphere. Agriculture, LULUCF is essentially forests. And you will be glad to know that we are a net forest emissions economy. In fact, forests absorb more than they emit in our country. Unlike Brazil or Congo or Indonesia, which are heavily forested countries, we are different. Although our not forests are not in the best of shape, they are not in the best of health, but still our forests emit less than what they absorb. So our forests are actually acting as a sink. And if you take all this together, it's about 2.6 to 2.8 billion tons a year. But this is going to rise. If we follow a business as usual path of growth, we will reach somewhere around 7 billion tons by 2050, by the middle of the century. And this is the challenge which we have to meet. This 7 billion tons likely scenario, with this has to be brought down to zero. So can we do this in the next, currently we are at 2.8, which is going to grow to 7. Can we do this? Can we follow a strategy which can bring it down and yet help us meet our aspirations of being a developed country by 2047? Good news is that emissions intensity is falling. Despite everything that is happening, because of, despite the fact that our emissions are growing, the emissions intensity of the GDP is falling, largely because of energy efficiency, not because of renewables. Renewables is a different story. I'll come to that. Emissions intensity is falling. In fact, against the target of 45% of our total emissions intensity reduction, which we have set for ourselves, we have already achieved 32% in 2020. So I think by in the next 4 to 5 years, we will be there. We'll reach 45% fully. But carbon intensity is still static. It's not falling. Emissions intensity is falling, carbon intensity is not falling. And that's the real catch. What is renewables doing? We talk here so much about renewables. Renewables indeed, this year, there was an announcement by the government that we have reached 50% capacity in terms of electricity generation capacity. Actual generation is only 21%, but capacity is now 50%. But is it really helping us? Because renewables are still 21% of our total consumption, the rest of this is still supplied by coal, fossil fuels and oil. So can we do this when we are supposed to bring it down to zero? How do we do this if we still rely on coal and fossil fuel? Can the renewables help us enough? The problem with the renewables is that it cannot be stored. And this is variable, and we need a grid supply which is stable. So we need additional technologies of energy storage. And net zero goal on top of this is a good aspirational goal, but our modeling tells us that even if we use everything possible, renewables, nuclear, hydro, electricity based on solar and wind, we will still have something about 3 billion tons in 2050, because we are supposed to be in the range of 7 billion tons in business as usual, and we will try and bring it down with the use of renewables and nuclear and hydro. Nuclear, in fact, is going to be 100 gigawatts against current 8 gigawatts, which is the aspiration of the government of India. And still we will have 3 billion tons of emissions in the system, because coal is not going to go completely away from our energy, completely. Because industries will still use some kind of fossil fuels to generate heat. Hydrogen is still expensive, and even in the model scenario by 2050, it is not going to meet completely 100% of energy demand. So we will need carbon sequestration and see what is the technological application of carbon sequestration, what is called CCUS, carbon capture, utilization and storage. So this is the inevitable part of it. Despite everything that we might be able to do in terms of solar, wind, nuclear and hydro, we will still need CCS, carbon capture and storage. This is not something which we are going to opt today. In fact, it's an extremely expensive technology. The rest of the world is trying to push it down our throat. We have steadfastly rejected this, because this is a solution for the developed countries, not for us. But we certainly need removal technologies in form of carbon sequestration, addition to our carbon sinks, forests, oceans, and conversion into alternative fuels. The other last point before I close this is the adaptation. because net zero is all about emissions and mitigation. But it doesn't help us completely avert the crisis. The crisis is already upon us in form of, you can see the losses and damages which are caused by adverse climatic developments. So these, water scarcity, for example, or loss of agricultural productivity, or emission, agriculture, for example, which is currently 16% of the total source of emissions, it has to move away from energy intensive inputs. And if you reduce fertilizer intake, if you reduce water intake, what is going to happen to agricultural production in that case? So these are questions which you have to answer. So it is not just about mitigation or net zero, you have to look at the impacts. How are we going to deal with the impacts in the next 50 years? And these are going to be huge. And we have to strengthen the capacity of the communities and the state governments, for which currently there is no arrangement and we have no solution. The fundamental problem is money, resources. In fact, in TERI we did some modeling here. We found that for meeting our current NDC goals, which is a combination of emissions intensity reduction, electricity generation, augmentation, and of course the adaptation goals also, so we need about $380 billion additionally till 2030, which is almost $40 billion every year. And if we have to meet net zero, which is again bringing it down to zero, we'll need about almost $17 trillion in addition. Now, where is this money going to come from? Currently our resources are already tied with SDGs. So this is an additional ask from us. How are we going to raise this money? And obviously governments cannot do this. The private sector, the entire financial ecosystem must be geared towards this. And we have to use all kinds of policy levers, all kinds of institutional arrangements, maybe incentives, maybe concessions. I mean, globally there are some models which can help us generate additional resources, but these additional resources, if we have to come from our own domestic resources, then it's actually a diversion away from the other developmental goals. So it has to be additional. There are no solutions. I mean, UNFCCC and other international bodies are now, they're all talking about the restructuring of the multilateral developmental banks, changing the pattern of lending, changing their resource base. Everything is in the future, so we don't know what is really going to happen. So conclusion is that we have to do it ourselves. And what we need is not just a net zero strategy, a long-term low emission development strategy, which takes care of everything. Changing our energy consumption and energy production pattern, including addressing the impacts through adaptation and meeting the losses and damages. And this will need a sectoral strategy. It cannot be done again at the national level. It needs transport, industry, agriculture. We need a sectoral transition strategy in each one of them. Some work has begun, but I think it is very, very notional at this stage. There is currently no work being done by any of the academic institutions, except maybe I think there is a group working in the NITI Aayog. Dr. Chand maybe may have more information about that, but that's about it. We have still not gone down to a sectoral transition work. The second is we need a financing plan, investment and financing plan. And the plan should go beyond financing. It should be an investment plan as well. So that we need to generate additional resources and gear towards this. And to me, adaptation is critical there, apart from mitigation. We can perhaps involve private sector well. In fact, the private sector, with the use of correct incentives, correct business models, they can be, somehow they can be co-opted into financing some part of our mitigation plans. But adaptation is something where private sector is absolutely not interested, because there are no returns here. We are only protecting our current economic resources from further loss and damage there. So how do we get the private sector involved there? We need some innovative strategy there. My own sense is that we need to involve communities and start rewarding them for the efforts which they make in conserving the environment or sustainability. And there are some models, we have to pay them for the ecosystem services which the communities generate. We may not be having enough resources, but I think we have to make a beginning. And I will again request Dr. Chand, who has been member of the 15th Finance Commission, to give some thought to this. maybe in the 16th Finance Commission, we should give some additional resources to the state governments based on vulnerability and use these additional resources. They already give 10% of the total evolution based on forestry benchmark, I mean the extent of the forest cover. But I think that can be slightly fine-tuned to also take care of the vulnerability in terms of climate and give some additional resources which the states can use to reward communities and to conserve their natural resources and prevent the further losses and damages. So I'll stop here, and thank you very much for being patient with me, Dr. Chand also, and I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rashmi. We will definitely have question at the end of session. Thank you for sharing with us very interesting number at global level and also what's going on in India. We will come to these things again, but thank you very much, and also your cooperation in management of time. So next speaker as per the list is Dr. Debolina Kundu. Dr. Kundu is Director of National Institute of Urban Affairs, New Delhi. So she will share with us her thought on measuring sustainable urban development.
Can you load the presentation, please? Thank you, Chair. A very good afternoon to dignitaries on the dais and of the dais, colleagues and friends. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Professor Sharma and Professor Chaturvedi for having me here. It's a great honor for me. I think cities are important, we all know. We are around 1/3 urban, even by the census definitions. We at the ministry level and also at the PMO level, we are thinking of revisiting the definition of urban, but even by the given definition, we are 1/3 urban, 1/3 rural, and 1/3 transitional. So when we generally talk about India is rapidly urbanizing, I think we are not rapidly urbanizing, but rapidly transitioning. The existing Gram Panchayats are getting in situ urbanized. They are where they are, but the rural settlements are transitioning into urban. I think this is one of the most important phenomenon which we have witnessed in the 2011 census, and that is the way the cities are growing. So when we talk about sustainability, I think that is one critical area where we need to put our energies and mind. Cities are important in terms of economic growth. We all know. They are also, cities cater to better access to services, innovation and entrepreneurship, economic and social mobility, connectivity and global integration. Cities also contribute disproportionately to the GDP. By the latest Government of India statistics, cities generate around 53% of the GDP, and this figure is likely to improve to around 80% by 2050. Urban productivity and agglomeration effects are also there in the cities. Again, urban GDP is very top heavy. The big cities, the metropolitan cities, they contribute to a large share of the GDP. And again, service sector is again highly urban concentrated. When we look at urbanization and economic growth, I think it's very well established across the globe and in India that there is a very direct relationship, very positive correlation between level of urbanization and per capita income. This has been also addressed in the recent budget announcements, where our Honorable Finance Minister has remarked, quoting, "Working with states, the government will facilitate development of cities as growth hubs, This will be achieved through economic and transit planning and orderly development of peri-urban areas utilizing town planning schemes. The current budget has also mentioned about creative redevelopment of cities and also provision of water and sanitation facilities to at least 100 major cities across the country. And one very important announcement was with regard to the Urban Challenge Fund, where Government of India would put up 25% of the investment as grants, and the remaining 75% has to come from either states, cities, or the private sector. And it's again very important that the Government of India is looking at cities as centers where the citizens would have a ease of living and ease of doing business. And whatever policy interventions are happening currently, those are geared towards these two major focus areas. I will not touch upon the global urbanization in the interest of time, but very briefly, the continents of Asia and Africa are the two where maximum growth of urban population is happening, and it will continue to do so in the next, in this entire century. And Delhi will surpass the Tokyo in the next few years, and it's being expected to be the largest conurbation with a population of more than 40 million people by 2035. So, while we talk about sustainability, I think it's very important to remember the figures. We have around 5,000 statutory towns. Because urban development is a state subject, we have the state government notifies settlements as urban. We have more than 5,000 just now. And even by conservative estimates, we have 5,000 census towns, which I mentioned a little while ago. That these are basically gram panchayats which have met the criteria of RGI as urban. However, these are currently under the Ministry of Rural Development, Panchayati Raj. So this is one area where we need to focus our interventions, because this is the transitioning area or the peri-urban area which needs focused interventions from the Government of India. I just now mentioned that we at the Government of India level, we are trying to revisit the census definitions. And if we look at the World Bank Agglomeration Index definition, in 2011 we were 55% urban, and by using the nightlight data we were 77% urban in 2015. So using the current definition, we are expected to be 50% urban in the year 2047. And this really throws up various challenges in terms of how do we contain urbanization, or how do we facilitate urbanization in a manner where we can sustain our urban growth. Sorry, I had a presentation for half an hour. I'm taking only the most important slides from there. So if we look at the drivers of urban growth, I think we all are aware it's natural increase, net rural to urban migration, and reclassification of urban settlements. I think reclassification of rural areas to urban areas, I think this is the most important driver of urbanization currently. So we tried at NIUA, we tried to look at how cities, major cities are growing. So you can see the built-up area in and around cities is growing at a very fast rate. And one important aspect of urbanization, as I mentioned, is peripheralization. We had 52 metropolitan cities, cities with more than 10 million population in 2011. 11 metropolitan cities did have 50% of the total population only within their municipal limits, which means a large section of the population grew outside the municipal limits, and that threw up a lot of planning challenges for the city managers. So I'll quickly go to the challenges of sustainable urbanization. I think one most important one is governance and administrative challenges. One is with regard to urban planning. The third is municipal finance and fiscal empowerment. And the fourth is when we are trying to address ease of living or ease of doing business, citizen-centric service delivery systems are very important, and we need to address those. When we look at political and civic administrative structures, I think we all are aware of the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, which tried to devolve funds, functions, and functionaries, which has yet to happen in an uniform manner across the country. There are multiplicity of departments. Capacity of urban local body officials is a major challenge, and we have a large array of small and medium towns which are deficit in terms of planning instruments as well as finances, and we need to really concentrate on those. The NITI Aayog had come up with a report a few years back, as per which 65% of our urban local bodies do not have master plans. Under the Amrut mission, we are trying to help all statutory towns come up with GIS-based master plans. There is a lot of activity under the mission Karam Yogi, the Aayog, through which training is happening. And we are also trying to see how census towns, which are currently beyond the ambit of the state urban development departments, how those could also be helped to improve their planning norms. When we look at the municipal finance sector, we see that around 45 cities in the country, they contribute to 75% of the own source revenues, which really means when we look at 5,000 odd urban local bodies, if we subtract the 45, we have only around 4,500 plus urban local bodies contribute to less than 1/4 of the own source revenues, which really means that our urban local bodies, our towns and cities, they do not have adequate finances to cater to the municipal needs. Through the National Urban Digital Mission, which is an offshoot of the Smart Cities Mission, which ended in March 2025, all urban local bodies are trying to be e-governed, and also service level benchmarks are again being catered to. We have a plethora of urban missions. The Amrut, as I mentioned, it's looking at making cities water secure and planned. The Swachh Bharat mission is looking at providing clean cities. The PMAY urban for housing. For the transport, we have the e-bus seva and also the metros. We are the third largest metro in the country. For livelihood, we have the National Urban Livelihood Mission, the PM Swanidhi for street vendors, the National Urban Digital Mission, and we just closed with the Smart Cities Mission. So I'm not going into the details of each of them in the interest of time. I would just like to focus on the final slide of the conclusion. So I think a very important point which was brought out by Professor Chaturvedi is the access, equity and inclusion. I think when we talk about sustainable development, it's very important to focus on the underprivileged sections of the population, and a lot of such people migrate to urban centers in the quest for better life and better livelihood. So that is one important area. Again, when we talk about, where we are all aware of the climate crisis, climate action plans are being prepared in many cities. I think that needs to have a regional focus instead of being concentrated only on a few cities. I think we need to look at the way the growth hubs grow. I think that needs to have a very direct climate focus on that. Under the Cities 2.0, in 18 states, climate observatories are being set up. I think those need to also talk to the 100 ICCCs, the integrated command and control centers, which have been set up under the Smart Cities mission. And it's also very important to bring administration closer to the people through digital governance, and climate proofing has to be cross-cutting for all urban development programs. And for the Urban Challenge Fund to be successful, I think we need to really work on our finances of the urban centers, comply with the Amrut reforms, and also improve the credit worthiness of urban local bodies. I end here and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Professor Kundu. As we all know, sustainability has several dimensions. So she covered some of the most important dimension of sustainable urban development, covering growth, ease of doing business, governance, administration, amenities, and like that. I hope in the question answer session, if there is any, somebody would like to raise the question of this exact connotation of sustainability, which is rooted in environment and those kind of things, that but about management of waste generated in urban areas. But she covered several dimensions of sustainable urban development. The third speaker today, we have Professor Pamidua. She is a professor in Delhi School of Economics. She was also chairman of Delhi School of Economics, and also she is member of Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Dr. Dua will share with us on the theme of enhancing livelihood and promoting well-being. Please.
Thank you very much, Professor Ramesh Chand. Can I have the remote for changing slides? Yeah. A very good afternoon to everyone present here. At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers of the conference, especially Professor Sachin Chaturvedi and Professor Alak Sharma, for inviting me to the conference. Professor Ramesh Chand, Professor Rashmi, Professor Kundu, distinguished participants. The objective of my presentation today is to analyze how livelihood and well-being can be embedded in the framework of lifestyle for environment to ensure a sustainable solution. First, some background. As we rethink development for the 21st century, one question stands central. How do people sustain life? Not merely economically, but socially, ecologically, and spiritually. Livelihoods are the foundation of this question. They are the ways people earn, adapt, and sustain their existence. Livelihoods are central to survival. They determine whether families have food to put on the table, send children to school, or withstand sudden shocks. Yet, too often, livelihoods remain fragile, marked by informality, precarity, or exploitation. The quality of this existence, what we call well being, depends on how these livelihoods interact with society and the environment. Before we explore how livelihoods might be strengthened, we first establish what we mean by livelihoods. When we speak of livelihoods, it is easy to fall into narrow interpretations, jobs, incomes, or survival strategies. Yet, the international understanding is broader and multidimensional. Robert Chambers and Gordon Conway define livelihood as the capabilities, assets, and activities required for a means of living. It is sustainable when it can cope with and recover from stresses and shocks, maintain or enhance its capabilities and assets, and provide opportunities for the next generation, while contributing net benefits to other livelihoods at local and global levels. Building on this conceptual framework, international frameworks such as the Sustainable Livelihoods Approach of UNDP and ADB operationalize the concept through 5 core capital assets: human capital, including health, education, knowledge, skills, adaptability; social capital, including networks, trust, participation, cooperation; natural capital, including land, water, biodiversity, ecosystems; physical capital, including infrastructure, housing, technology; and financial capital, including income, credit, savings, and remittances. The ILO Decent Work Agenda situates livelihoods in a rights-based framework of employment creation, rights to work, social protection, and social dialogue, ensuring that work contributes to fairness, dignity, and safety. Together, these definitions present livelihoods as dynamic systems of resources, relationships, skills, and resilience to be evaluated not only by income or output, but by whether they expand people's substantive freedoms to live with dignity and security. If livelihoods describe the means by which people secure survival, then well-being represents the end toward which these means should ultimately point. To strengthen livelihoods without considering well-being would be to miss the purpose of development. Amartya Sen argued that well-being cannot be reduced to the possession of goods or even the generation of income. Rather, it is about people's capabilities, their real freedoms to lead the lives they value. For example, two people with the same income may experience very different well-being depending on their health, education, gender, or social context. This approach shifts our focus from material means to human ends. It compels us to ask not only what do people have, but also what can they do and what they have. The OECD Well-being Framework operationalizes this thinking by organizing well-being into 3 dimensions. First, objective conditions of life. These are the measurable aspects of living, things we can observe and quantify. For example, health, housing, education, income, jobs. Second is subjective experiences. This is about how individuals themselves evaluate their lives, their satisfaction, happiness, and sense of purpose. And third is relational aspects. This is perhaps the most human dimension. It focuses on the quality of our social connections, dignity, belonging, trust, and agency. A secure livelihood strengthens all these pillars of well-being identified in the OECD well-being framework: material conditions, quality of life, and relational resources. The ILO's decent work agenda reinforces this perspective, emphasizing that work is only decent when it is productive, provides fair income, ensures security, upholds rights, and enables voice through social dialogue. Work that is exploitative, unsafe, or exclusionary may generate income but corrodes well-being by eroding dignity, health, and empowerment. Thus, livelihoods are not ends in themselves but pathways to multidimensional well-being. Now I turn to the Lifestyle for Environment framework. India's Lifestyle for Environment initiative provides a 21st century framework for analyzing and advancing sustainable livelihoods. Life, in short, has evolved from a behavioral movement into an integrated model of lifestyle for sustainable development recognized by the United Nations Environment Assembly and the G20 high-level principles. India's Lifestyle for Environment initiative, launched at COP26 in 2021, reframes climate action as a matter of everyday choice and collective ethics. Building on the Paris Agreement and Agenda 2030, it promotes mindful consumption, resource conservation, and sustainable livelihoods alongside policy and technology solutions. Institutionalized through Mission Life in 2022 by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change and NITI Aayog, the initiative moves from awareness to action, mobilizing citizens, institutions, and local governments toward low-carbon, resilient living. Under India's G20 presidency in 2023, LIFE evolved into the global concept of lifestyle for sustainable development, endorsed in the G20 Leaders Declaration and later recognized by the United Nations Environment Assembly. In a sense, LIFE links policy, ethics, and everyday behavior, demonstrating that sustainability begins with conscious living and that individual action can scale into global transformation. There are 5 dimensions of life. First is sustainable consumption and production. So this life stresses that livelihoods must shift towards sustainability, creating jobs that regenerate rather than deplete the planet. This means green employment, renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, ecotourism, and circular economy innovations. Consider the farmer who transitions from pesticide-intensive monoculture to agroecology. His livelihood becomes not only more resilient to shocks, but also a contributor to soil health, biodiversity, and nutrition. Or think of the cooperative that recycles waste into usable materials, creating jobs while reducing environmental degradation. Here, livelihoods and environmental regeneration move hand in hand. Second aspect of life is infrastructure and technology. Sustainability requires not only new behaviors but new systems, the physical and technological backbone that supports green livelihoods. Life calls for climate resilient infrastructure, renewable energy networks, digital inclusion, and innovation ecosystems that connect people and planet. Each of these becomes a livelihood opportunity. Solar engineers, EV technicians, green architects, rural water managers, and data driven service providers who bring technology to underserved areas. These jobs not only provide income but also expand access to energy, transport, and digital tools, enhancing quality of life while reducing carbon intensity. Here, technology becomes a force for inclusion and resilience. Third aspect of life is individual and community behavior, values, and ethics. At its core, life is not just a policy framework, it is a moral and cultural one. It recognizes that no transformation is sustainable unless it is rooted in values. These values are cooperation, care, and consciousness. Livelihoods here emerge from shared purpose, like self help groups, cooperatives, care workers, artisans, teachers, and social innovators. Such livelihoods build human and social capital. They empower women, preserve traditions, and strengthen the social fabric. When communities act collectively and ethically, livelihoods cease to be competitive, struggles for survival, and instead become expressions of shared well being. This is where economics reconnects with empathy, where the work we do reflects the values we hold. Fourth aspect of life is governance, financing, partnerships, and policies. For sustainable livelihoods to thrive, enabling institutions are essential. Life emphasizes financing and partnerships that align markets and policies with sustainability. This includes green finance, social enterprises, and public private collaborations that mobilize resources for inclusive development. Livelihoods in this sphere are as vital as those in production, from social entrepreneurs and cooperative bankers to sustainability auditors and policy researchers. These actors design frameworks that ensure fairness, transparency, and access. Good governance transforms sustainability from a private choice to a public norm where equity, accountability, and participation define the economy. The fifth aspect of life is innovative metrics of progress. So finally, life demands new measures of success. As we know, GDP cannot capture well-being or sustainability. Life calls for metrics that value livelihood security, ecological regeneration, gender equity, and human flourishing. Taken together, these 5 dimensions form a coherent framework linking livelihoods to well-being while safeguarding life itself. They ensure that when people pursue livelihoods, they are not forced to choose between survival today and sustainability tomorrow. Life shows that development need not be a trade-off between growth and ecology, but can instead be a balance between capability, equity, and care. Around the world, communities are already living these principles. Farmers adopting agroforestry, women's groups running solar microgrids, youth enterprises building rural digital services. Most importantly, life restores intergenerational justice. It reminds us that livelihoods are not sustainable unless they safeguard opportunities for the next generation. It is not enough for today's jobs to provide income if they destroy the ecosystems upon which tomorrow's jobs depend. Life ensures that livelihoods expand capabilities not only for the present but for the future, creating a world where work, ethics, and well-being coexist in harmony. Now here, what I have done is some mapping of the 5 aspects of life, the components of each aspect, and the livelihoods that are created from each aspect, and what well-being these result in. So the constituents for each aspect of life I have taken from my own earlier work, which is published in the Economic and Political Weekly in the May issue. And the first column gives you the 5 components, the second column gives you the constituents of that component, and third is the livelihood examples, and the last one is the well-being outcome. So very quickly, just to give you one example only, respecting the time constraint. So if I take the first aspect, we have sustainable production and consumption. The components of this include biodiversity conservation, circular economy, ecosystem restoration, ethical treatment of animals, climate change adaptation, and pollution prevention. Livelihood examples emerging from these areas include agroecology and organic farming, biodiversity-based tourism, waste management and upcycling, forest-produced value chains, and ecosystem restoration work. And the well-being that would come from this is food and environmental security, resilience to shocks, intergenerational equity, and ecological balance, and so on. So for the other aspects, I have already mentioned in my earlier points some of the livelihoods and well-beings, and details of this I can share with you. Now, this entire life concept was advocated by our Honorable Prime Minister, and India has endorsed this life aspect, and therefore I will not get into the details here, that there are many ways in which we can show that India has made a distinctive contribution to global sustainability by adopting this approach. Now, the life approach also mentions communities, and I have examined the case study of one community, which is also published in my Economic and Political Weekly article, so I won't go into it. So I had chosen a community which is based in Diyarbakir and Agra, which has all the livelihoods, well-being, very well spelled out, and also the compliance with all the life aspects. So I will skip that in view of shortage of time. And now I go straight to the question, how should we go beyond GDP? So that is the GDP conundrum. As we know, economic growth as conventionally measured often obscures the true state of livelihoods and well-being. Unsustainable resource extraction can increase GDP while depleting natural capital. Informal and unpaid work such as caregiving, subsistence farming, or community volunteering remains invisible in national accounts despite being fundamental to social reproduction. At times, growth coexists with worsening well-being when jobs are precarious, exploitative, or ecologically destructive. Further, sustainable livelihoods frameworks emphasize that outcomes must be judged not merely by income levels, but by reductions in vulnerability, improvements in resilience, and sustainable use of natural resources. GDP alone does not capture this. So this realization has spurred a global search for alternative measures of progress. The OECD's How's Life series, which was launched in 2011, places well-being, not GDP, at the center of assessment. It measures not just income and jobs, but also health, education, social connections, environmental quality, security, and life satisfaction. We also have Bhutan's National Happiness Index. We have New Zealand's well-being budget, and we have the United Nations Human Development Index, and we also have indicators for well-being that were constructed in RIS under Professor Chaturvedi, about 35 such indicators which point to well-being. So we need more work in this area. So moving beyond GDP is the necessary step if livelihoods are to translate into genuine well-being. So concluding reflections very quickly. First, we must recognize livelihoods as more than employment or income. Second, well-being must I think that's an indicator for me to stop. So second, well-being must remain our ultimate goal. And third, most importantly, the Lifestyle for Environment framework provides a way forward, anchoring livelihoods in ethics, sustainability, inclusion and justice, and ensuring that they serve not only people today, but generations yet to come. I think we have to accept that the challenge before us is immense, but the opportunity is greater still. If we can embed livelihoods within a well-being and life framework, we can move from fragile survival to sustainable flourishing for individuals, for communities, and for our planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Pammidua. Really very, very profound messages. I wrote her paper on the experience of the Albag Institute. Really worth reading if you are interested in this theme. Well, friends, we have ran out of time, mainly because we started 1 hour late. But sustainability implies that you don't pass on that to next generations. So I will try to complete it as soon as possible so that there is some time for lunch and starting time of next session, which is mentioned to be 3 p.m. But I think I will be doing injustice to the participant and audience if I do not give opportunity to take a few questions. My request will be, please raise question, avoid observation which can be shared during lunch or tea break, and also mention to whom you are addressing this question without me. Okay. So, anybody, organizer, can you pass on mic to someone? If yeah, Dr. Singh. If mic is not there, please come here. Huh? We can save time this way. Please identify yourself for benefit of others.
I am speaking from Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee, and my question is to Professor Kundu. Currently, cities are in very bad shape, and carrying capacity is also questionable. You have mentioned about 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, and most of the states have not even handed over the 18 departments to the local bodies, and parastatal are working together, and there is lack of coordination among urban development authorities and urban local bodies. So my question, and even planning is not integrated. As per the constitutional provisions, DPC should play an important role to integrate the rural and urban planning and to prepare a composite planning including and establishing the rural-urban linkages effectively. So, keeping all these aspects in view, I would like to know from you what should be the institutional reform to make urban areas sustainable, especially can we think that these parallel departments, whether it is water department or urban development department, should come under the constitutional bodies, urban local bodies or urban panchayat, and then similar to other state, like within the state government there are several departments which look after different governance and execution of different plans. So can we think of bringing all these parastatical or parallel departments within one umbrella, and that is the constitutionally empowered local bodies? That is my question.
The end. Any others? Yeah, please come. Question? Okay, okay. Fill in the blanks till the next person comes. Yeah, please give to him. No problem. No need to fight.
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead.
So my question is to Ms. Pamme. As you have mentioned that employment is livelihood is beyond employment and ways. So in your presentation, you have mentioned about 3C: content, cooperation, care, and consciousness. Is there a scope to add a fourth C: contentment?
Okay, thank you. Please pass on my.
Namaste, I am A.K. Shrivastava. I have been with ICR, Director of VPK Salmoda. I have one submission, almost roughly about 40 million hectares or so is lying there available for carbon sequestration. So, as per our session, we can have a very good balance of carbon sequestration, arranging, managing those land and working out some instrument how to manage that.
Thank you very much. So this way we have one question to each of the paper presenter, but there is a person who has been raising hand. That will be the last question.
Sir, I have a question.
Okay, then yours will be the last. Yeah. Where is Mike?
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Usman Suleiman Sarki from Nigeria. A lot have been said with regard to urbanization. A lot has been said about urbanization and sustainable development, the issue of livelihood and well-being. However, my observation is little was said with regard to challenges or effects of urbanization, or the challenges of urbanization on sustainable development, which I feel is very key. That whenever we have urbanization, there are consequences of that. People move from rural to urban areas, which makes the urban areas to be congested, and that has a lot of consequences. We have emerging crimes that affect sustainable development. We have a lot of diseases or illnesses caused by the congestion in urban areas, which also affects livelihood. So I feel this issue should also be considered, and something has to be said on that, so that measures could be taken to address the likely challenges that may affect sustainable development in urban areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Pass on to next. Thank you.
I am Saida Banu from Sambalpur University. My question is to Professor Kundu, that during COVID we have seen the vulnerabilities of seasonal migrants and short duration migrants, laborers. They are mainly the contributor of economic, in terms of GDP, we cannot ignore their contribution. And when you're talking about sustainable development, and you have talked about they are the marginalized section of the country, and you have talked about that they should be included in terms of access, equity and inclusion. How you are going to reflect that in terms of concrete policies? Thank you.
Thank you. So we start from you, Professor.
Thank you. I think all three questions are very important. I'll be very brief in addressing those. The first question, we talked about parastatals under ULBs. I think that's a major decision the Government of India needs to take, because parastatals are state entities, whereas ULBs are constitutional entities as well. So last year in November 2024, 5 working groups were formed by the Government of India under the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and one looked at this issue of how do we synergize the impacts or the functions of parastatals and ULBs. So instead of competing, how can they collaborate? So the Government of India is still finalizing its recommendations. Once it becomes public, I think you will be aware of the solutions, which I am unable to disclose now. And this was also one of the reforms under NURM. And the next question on rural-urban migration, I think that is one of the issues which, again, when the poor migrate to cities in search of livelihoods and better quality of life, it's not always that the cities are able to offer them, a result of which we see the formation of slums. But the Government of India is taking steps, the state governments as well, to upgrade the living conditions. I was in the city of Bhubaneswar a few months back, and I was standing in a slum and I was looking for a slum, because all buildings, I won't say buildings, all tenements were concrete. They had water supply, they had adequate lighting within the households, and also a place for an economic activity. So there are instances where the Government of India and state governments have been able to upgrade slums into better conditions of living through the Prime Minister Awas Yojana, and also the state government missions like the Jaga mission, where the state government of Orissa is also working on slum proofing, so that future settlements do not become slums. They have adequate and sustainable ways of life. So this is the answer to the next question. And the third question, if you could kindly repeat, what was it?
We will take it later.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for the suggestion of adding contentment. We can surely have a 4C framework. But I do remember that I also said satisfaction 2-3 times. So that comes under OECD framework. They do include satisfaction. So contentment in that sense is incorporated. But it's nice to have 4 C's instead of 3 C's. Thank you.
Okay. This 40 million hectares or 55 million hectares, whatever is the correct number, all of this cannot be used for plantations, number one, because they have their own biodiversity uses. We can't plant trees everywhere. For example, in Rajasthan, if you have open lands, degraded lands, you can't plant trees simply there, because this is a large part of this is desert. So the short point is that we can use only a certain part of the wastelands or degraded lands for plantations. And carbon stock, the carbon sequestration is different from land restoration. We have a target of land restoration called 26 million hectares of land restoration, and it's already declared by the Prime Minister, and that is being done. But all of this will not yield results in terms of carbon sequestration unless we have a dedicated program. We have a target of 2.5 to 3 billion tons of additional carbon stock to be generated in the forests. Now that itself is a very major challenge. Forget about the land that is lying outside the forests. That is either a rural land, agricultural banner land, and you cannot actually incentivize plantations unless you pay for it, unless you pay the communities for raising these trees. If we have, there is a concept of something called MSPs. If you have MSPs for crops, why can't you have an MSP for a tree? If you really are really interested in raising the carbon stock outside the forests, you have to have a program for incentivizing it. But be that as it may, we have to focus within the forests. Within the forests, we have large areas where the forests are getting degraded. And we have large funds lying with the government in form of what is called CAMPA. 60,000 crores lying idle with the government. It's not being used. Why? Because there is a several structural inflexities in our program, inefficiencies are in the way we organize our work. So I would suggest that apart from focusing on land restoration outside the forests, we should also pay attention to what we can do within the forests.
Thank you. Professor Kundu is now able to recall the third question, but I think system is not favorable.
So the National Urban Livelihood Mission, which was restricted to only 790 cities in the pilot, now we are also working on firming up, and that will be rolled out, I think, for all the statutory towns. That is one. And the PM Swanidhi 2.0 is already been launched, which is taking care of the issues of the street vendors by providing them loans at a very nominal charge. Thank you.
So friends, we have three very insightful presentation by the people who are considered authority in this area, be it climate change, be it urbanization or livelihood. In fact, I learnt a lot, and I noted some of the points, but I promised with myself that I will spare at least 20 minutes between the end of this session and beginning of the next session. So I will just take 3-4 minutes to make some brief, unconventional kind of comments. First, Dr. Rashmi shared with us how emission is increasing, how temperature is rising. All those things are very important at aggregate level, global level. For India also, he shared interesting numbers with us. But if you want to persuade public in a particular direction, that you adopt something which is mentioned in life or those kind of things, I feel we also need to develop some indicator at local level. For example, if I have to tell farmers, if you are growing paddy, it is leading into emissions. But he says, I am not seeing emissions. I am not feeling emissions. So is it possible that we think of some of the indicators at local level which are perceived by people that these are the kind of things happening, therefore they have to address it. This is a challenge also, but I feel, because sometimes I go to field and I talk to farmers, I just tell them, you know, this cow which is holy for us, how much emission it is emitting. 54% of the emission of agriculture sector comes from rumen, from livestock. But they feel offended. They said, how come? My cow, it gives me so many good things. How you are saying it is causing emission and all those things? But I know it is causing. But can we then develop some indicators, because sharing these things that temperature is rising, it is happening, people are feeling uncomfortable. But if we can have, I know it is slightly unconventional kind of things, but some people attempted. Like in the area of sustainability, if some of you have seen work by N.S. Jodha, he just recognized that indicators of sustainability are very complex, but indicators of unsustainability are very easy. So he developed a framework that these are the indicators of unsustainability, so which will give the similar message as the indicator of sustainability. But my suggestion is not to undermine the valuable ideas and suggestions which Rashmi ji shared with us. And also some of the things, at least which were not known to me, that in India forests are net emitter, if I understand him right, that we grow tree with this thinking that there will be carbon sequestration. Here we find that maybe the way we are growing trees, they are the net emitter, and we need to find out that is the only, I would say, source with us to mitigate the effect of climate change. So how we can convert from net emitter to that net absorbing carbon sequestration kind of things. And I fully agree with him in terms of this resources that we have to do it ourselves, and it's not, and we also need to involve states into it. You know that action happen at the states, so we need to involve states also with it. Professor Kundu shared with us several aspects related to sustainability of urban in terms of large number of dimensions, but there are other dimensions also like waste management in other areas. But again here I have some unconventional kind of things, that people thought that urban area are the growth center and periphery, they are the growth driver, when rural area were not having adequate infrastructure, connectivity, broadband, all those kind of things. I come from my village, rural area, and I go there every 2 months. I find lot of economic activity happening in rural areas. In fact, I was surprised that rural urban national count statistic information comes only when there is a change in the base year. So the last data we have is for 4, 5 and 11, 12. So I published again paper in EPW where I just showed that growth of manufacturing in the rural area was higher than what was the growth in urban areas. So is it that the old view of that only urban city are the growth driver, rural can't be? Is it that situation is changing with connectivity and all those kind of things, or it is argument is not as strong now as it used to be 30 years back or 40 years back when we came with this came with this hypothesis. So Professor Pamidwa really again shared with us that life, the term which was coined by our Prime Minister, and he mentioned it in the presence of UN Secretary General when he came to Statue of Unity in Gujarat. Really a unique kind of concept. So we need to see to it that how we can operationalize it. So with these things, I thank all the three speakers for brilliant presentation, and I also feel sorry that I had to ask them to squeeze their presentation from something like 30 minutes to about 18-20 minutes, but I feel so happy that it is their ability to articulate that none of the main message has gone missing. So I also thank all the participants that though there was lunch break, but you kept sitting and listened very attentively, and also raised very interesting questions. Thank you very much.
With this, we thank all our esteemed speakers and the audience for your valuable participation.